Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Mayers, and for my bibliography assignment, I am doing it on Dr. Betty Hart. She was a psychologist and also a researcher. There are a couple of things that we're going to talk about with regarding Betty Hart as to who she was, some books that she has written, additional articles that she was a part of, and also has written, and why she is so important to this field of ABA and psychology. And lastly, I have a couple of interview questions. If I were to see her in person, what would I say to Betty Hart? All right, let's go ahead and jump into who she is. So, Betty Hart was actually born on July 15th, 1927. And unfortunately, she had deceased in 2012 on September 28th. After doing a little bit of research, I was able to identify that she had died from lung cancer um, back in 2012. She actually graduated from the University of Kansas, um, and she was an author for two books that I was able to identify. One was called Meaningful Differences in the Everyday Experience of the Young American Children. And that was actually with a colleague of hers. His name is Todd R. Risley, if I'm not saying that correctly. Um, they actually were in communication a lot. So you'll see his name pop up a lot throughout our conversation. That book was basically an introduction to what the gap is. Why is there a learning gap? And what can we do to fix it? What are some strategies? Another book that she has written was called The Social World of Children Learning to Talk. Now, this was also with Todd R. Risley, and this was based on how learning and language can be based on how you communicate with your child, also including some strategies on how to support with that. Now, Betty Hart is mostly known for observing poor children overcome speech and vocabulary deficits. And then also, she's very keen on language, how kids are developing language at a very young age, and who are the people that support with that in their everyday lives. Now, some additional articles that you might have seen in my bibliography is called The Early Catastrophe, the 30 million word gap by age 3. This jumps into the academic growth gap, environmental settings, where are they learning? Is it at home, school, just being in their whole environment and understanding the whole child. How is this child living? Another article that I was able to check out was called Incidental Teaching of Language in Preschool. Now, this jumps into exactly what incidental teaching is, and it talks about how structured learning based on their natural learning environment utilizes the child's interest in things that are naturally motivating. This is a great resource because I was able to understand a little bit how natural environment plays a huge role in language. Effects of the social reinforcement on isolated behavior in nursery school child is another article that I was able to check out. And it's about the increasing social interactions with peers and adults. It discusses how important adults play a role in their child's life when it comes to language. How they interact with them on a day-to-day basis displays how language growth is established. Now, the longitudinal study of interactive systems was the last article that I was able to look at. And it involves the home observations that Betty Hart was able to do and look at unstructured activities to observe interactions with how children develop language. So basically, you kind of see that Betty Hart is really keen on understanding language and how it is developed. Now, why is she so important to this field? Now, she was a researcher. She has researched many things regarding language and how the child is able to grow in their language. And sometimes it's for years based off that one child. She was the person who develop teaching strategies with incidental language based off her observations. And she was the person who promotes learning with the individualized teaching that that child receives. Now, language development was a very important piece, of course, because she's looking at the interactions within family, within schools, within whoever that child comes in contact when she's doing her observations. Another thing was understanding what the gap is. There was students that she was looking at or families that she was looking at, poor, working class, professional parents. How are those parents communicating with that child? That's something that they were able to look at. And then, of course, their environmental setting. How are they being raised? If they're all attending the same school, why is the child with the professional parents able to succeed a little bit more than our parents who are a little bit struggling in that environment, who have a poor income? Then we have the deeper understanding on why language is so important. Now, language is so important, and it's because we're looking at a different light, and that's how Betty Hart helps us do that. That's why I believe she's really important to this field. Now, of course, these are my questions. So I know Betty Hart is not alive, but if she were, I would be able to ask her a few. One would be, when you were a teacher, what grade did you teach and where? I thought this was important because, based off this picture that I was able to find, I noticed that she was teaching in a preschool in Kansas City. So I wonder what age group these kids were. I understand preschool, but how old? Another one would be, when you conducted your study, how many of those students had a learning disability? I know students with learning disabilities, of course, they learn a lot differently than students who do not have it. So were you looking at both, or were you just looking at one student in particular? Another question I would ask is, did you see a difference in the behavior based on the socioeconomic status of the child and their families? So students that might have been in a poor income, students that might have been in a working class, or even people with professional parents. Then, of course, I would have asked, would you want to write a book on best parenting practices or families, no matter their socioeconomic status, so they have a jump start on how to support their child at a very young age? I thought this was an important question because she really targets those families or different types of families. So I figured, why not create a book? If you have not already done so, that I wasn't able to find. Another one, or the last question that I have, is, do you believe your research made a difference in society? I'm curious to know her response if I had the chance, because she's done a lot of research. So what do you think what was she able to grasp by the end of her research? And then, of course, I'm going to jump back to where I had my additional articles. If you look here at the image, this is, of course, Dr. Betty Hart. And then you'll also see Todd R. Risley. This is the person who she's been doing a lot of her writing with and communicating and observing these things. And then, of course, it's the references page, where you're able to take a look at different sites where I got my information, and you can take a look at what she does as well. Sorry, I apologize for my dog. But thank you so much for listening, and I'm looking forward to your feedback. Thank you.